I'm going to tie a real easy, simple bass popper for you today. This is the Clouser EZ Popper. Bob Clouser came out with a book back around 2005, I think it was, called Clouser Flies. And this was in it. He had actually been fishing this and developing it for a while, but it's a really, really simple fly if you want to get into doing poppers for bass and panfish or any other species that will take surface flies, poppers and things like that off the surface. It's basically some foam cylinder here, tail components. It's got some epoxy around it, and the epoxy's got some glitter in it. I actually got a little bit too much fine glitter, kind of masking the eyes just a little bit here. But it's a simple fly to put together. There's a couple of things to consider. I'm going to more or less follow how it's done in the book. If you haven't gotten that book yet, I've mentioned it in other videos. It is an excellent book if you're going to do a lot of warm water fishing. Even there's a number of flies in there that are actually very good for multiple different species. But anyway, that is the Clouser EZ Popper. I'm actually surprised that there is not a video out there on this already. It's so simple to make. You're using just some foam cylinders. These are pre-cut and in different sizes, different colors, things like that. But like I said, I'm surprised there's not a video out there. That is the Clouser EZ Popper, and I'm going to get started. So I'm going to start the Clouser EZ Popper by putting my hook in the vise. For this, I'm using a Mustad 3366. This is in a size 4. A lot of times, if you're going to tie this fly, you're going to experiment a little bit with different sizes. And you're going to go with different hooks depending on the size of the foam. As I had mentioned earlier, this is just a closed-celled cylinder foam. You can buy these in different colors and different sizes. This is a 3/4 inch, which is too big for what we're going to do. I'm using a 1/2 inch here, and that's why I chose that size hook. So you probably go with some smaller sized hook. A little bit. You can go with a longer shank hook if you want to even have a longer body on these, or more in the tail. It's up to you. It is a popper slash kind of bass, hook. So you want to make certain that you are keeping with a wide gap hook. Let's put it that way. You want to keep that gap pretty wide simply because that head of that popper is going to take up a little bit of room. Now to start out with, on this particular size hook, I'm going to take my foam. Again, this is a 3/4, so it's bigger than what I'm actually going to use here, but I've already prepped the head. I'm going to measure a 1/2 inch here, and I'm going to cut that across this way. Once I have that cut to a 1/2 inch, I'm then going to cut the corner off this way. But when you do, you want to make certain you're not cutting all the way directly down here and across the top here. So we don't want this angle to go all the way from this edge here down to that edge here. You want to leave some still there. So you're just going to chop a little of that corner off there. And technically speaking, you don't have to. Again, Lefty Cray had a popper. I can't remember what he called it, but it was just very simple. It was even square foam. It's just a block of foam, so you don't have to. But this is the EZ Popper, so that's what I'm showing you. The other thing is that you're going to take your razor and you're going to make a slit in that foam. And when you make the slit here, that slit that you're going to make is going to go just to the far side of this little face on the back, and it's going to come up towards the center in the front. What that's going to do is it's going to cause the popper to it's not going to sit on the hook like this, nice and level. It's actually going to sit on the hook more like this. And the reason for that is that in the water, when these are in the water, the back side of that is going to actually go down in the water just a little bit. So that brings this face up here, which right here tends to be sloped forward. It brings it more perpendicular, so when you pull on it, it gives a nice flat face that pops on the water. So for thread, I'm just starting out with a UTC 140 Denier in black. This gets covered up, but this is what is we're going to affix the popper head to. I'm going to wrap this on. I'm going to work my way back just to the point of the hook. This is going to be pretty much the back side of the head on this fly. I'm going to come back forward again, but when I do, I'm going to bring this in an open wrap. And the reason for that is it gives me more surface area for my super glue to adhere to and affix that popper on there. I'm just going to do a 4-turn whip finish, and I'm done with black thread. You could use any color thread you want on this actually right here, because it's just going to get covered up. Now I'm going to take some super glue. I'm using just some Gorilla Glue. I like this one because it has both a nozzle applicator, but it also has a brush in it. But if you have some Zap-A-Gap or Loctite or whatever, that'll work. I just use a regular super glue. You could use a gel if you want. It's going to give you more work time. But once you do a few of these, I find that I really don't need that extra work time, and I would rather it set up a little bit quicker. You don't want a lot dripping off here, and I'll show you why in just a second. Mostly it's so that you don't end up gluing your own fingers to the popper. You can do this however you want to. I'm going to do this in a way so that you can see it, and that is I'm going to pinch the head of that popper like I did before. So I'm going to open it. I'm going to turn this upside down. It's easier for you, and I'll actually tilt it a little bit your way so that you can see just what I'm doing. I'm going to put this on here, and again, I'm going to get the back all the way up to the back end of this face, and then the front is up to the end of that cut. I'm going to line this up so it's nice and perpendicular in line with the hook. Then I'm just going to squeeze this together. As you can see, I got a little bit of squeeze out in the back here. If you get too much super glue in there, it's going to squeeze out of that seam, and then it's going to get on your fingers. That's why you really don't want it dripping. You just want to have a coat on there. A little goes a long way. So as I squeeze this together, it's actually pushed up into that seam, and it will seal up the bottom of this. Have your bodkin ready and a little bit of tissue, paper towel, whatnot to wipe away the excess. That will have our head all fixed to our hook now. So if you're following the steps in the book that I mentioned earlier, this is the first thing that we're going to do. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to attach the tail components here. So I'm now switching over to a red. This is a Danville 6/0 in red. And the only reason I'm doing the red is because I'm going to end up with some red Estaz in the back here. And this is just going to keep with the overall red butt section of the fly. If you want a chartreuse or you want a different color, by all means, then use that color thread. The EZ Popper uses some Kipp tail. for the actual tail section. I'm going to take some out here, maybe about a half a pencil in diameter, about like this. Clean this, get the short fibers out, and then I'm going to measure this about, I like it a little bit longer. In the book, he uses it the whole hook as a measure, as a marker for measuring it. You're going to go from the front of the eye of the hook back to the bend here, but I like to do mine a little bit longer than that. Not a marker, but as like a ruler. That's what I meant to say. Got my head in different places. Okay, so we're going to tie this in. This is part of the reason I chose this hook, because I don't need a whole lot of space for the butt section here. I just need not even a quarter of the shank of that hook to do the tail section on this. Most of this fly is the foam popper head. So I'm going to tie that in real well, give myself a nice base of red. So I got my tail in. I'm going to also at this point put in some head cement. This is just simply going to help keep things all kind of held together. It's going to soak down in there. This fly is going to get beat up. If you're casting this out to any bass at all, or even large panfish, you're going to be banging this on logs and rocks and along the bank and on all kinds of stuff. And plus the fish are going to chew this up pretty well. So I just put a little extra on there to secure it. Next is to put some flash in the tail, and I'm just using some pearl flash. This is a flash accent. You can use a crystal flash if you want. I'm going to take about half a dozen strands. I'm going to set them up on the top of that tail section. Fold those over, and I just want those. I'm going to spread them out just a little bit, but I'm going to put those in just on top there. Then I'm going to trim those about the length of the tail. I'll talk a little bit about the tail here in just a second. So with the Kipp tail and the flash tied in, again, going along with the directions from the book, I'm going to put in a whip finish here. And this is just to secure my thread, because I'm going to cut away my thread at this point. The EZ Popper has some epoxy on it to help it be more durable, basically. And actually, he puts some, glitter in with the epoxy. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but it gives it a little bit more sparkle. And actually, you don't even have to put the epoxy on here if you don't want to. It's just going to get chewed up a lot quicker. However, again, if you're following along with the book, at this stage, you're going to take your thread off here. We're going to put our eyes on, and we're going to put the epoxy on. Now, I'm not going to show you the actual application of the epoxy. I'll talk about it a little bit, but the reason that we're going to do it now, there is some Estaz that gets wrapped in here as a collar in the back. You can't, basically, once you put the Estaz on, you're not going to get that epoxy in there. It's going to get all in the Estaz and make it a mess. So before we put that Estaz on, we've got to do the epoxy. Now, as far as the eyes go, I'm using, this is a 7/16. It's a flat 2D stick-on eye. You could use a 3D if you want. I'm going to put these on, and they're just going to go right in the center of each side, like this. By the way, if you haven't seen me do this before, I use my bodkin to peel these off, these adhesive eyes off of the backing. You try to do your fingers, you're going to make a mess of it. Just use the very tip of your bodkin to peel that off, and then you can place the eye right where you want it, and then I press down on the eye and slide my bodkin out from underneath it. Then I get easy placement for these eyes, and I don't have them all getting stuck all over my hand. Now, the other reason for the epoxy also is to help hold those eyes on. Now, like I said, at this stage, I would mix up the epoxy. I would put it on there. I would put it in a turner or whatever I needed to in terms of curing that. If you're interested in me doing another video or a series of videos on using epoxy in fly tying, let me know in the comments down below, because I certainly could do a few videos and talk more in depth about using epoxy and even UV resin. However, I'm not going to put the epoxy on here and make you watch that, because I have one already done up to this point right here. So at this point, we'll put our Estaz on. Now, before I do that, I do want to talk about the construction of this fly, in that that's how Bob Clouser does it in the book. He gets the fly finished to this point, puts the epoxy on, reattaches the thread, and puts the Estaz on. However, if you want to, just for your consideration, since the first thing you're going to do is glue that foam onto the hook, before you do anything, just put your eyes and your epoxy on. You can do a whole bunch of these. I've got, a handful of these already pre-done. The nice thing is that you can then put whatever tail on the end that you want. I mean, not that you couldn't do that this way, but you have these already pre-made and they're all ready to go. So consider that. You can, again, have a longer shanked hook if you want, and you can put some hackle on the back here, some rubber legs, any number of things. You can palmer a hackle collar in instead of putting the Estaz. You can do all kinds of things. But I find, especially with this, is a 30-minute epoxy. So when I apply it, I have to put it on a turner so that it comes out and cures nice and smooth. So I just as soon do, a dozen of these heads all at once, and then I can just put them in the vise and finish the tails out however I want to. That's just me. So this is finishing up the actual Bob Clouser EZ Popper. I'm going to reattach my thread here. Oh, hold on. Let me secure the fly first. And I have to rethread my bobbin. So I'll reattach my thread here. Again, the red is just used because of the red Estaz. It gives me a nice base. I'm going to, this is a standard red Estaz. It's not a grande, but obviously if you're doing this in a larger foam, you might go with a grande. Do this on a big old 2 or 3/0 hook. I am going to put just a little bit of head cement down here. Again, that's just going to help hold that together a little bit better. And then I'm just going to get 3 or 4 wraps of this Estaz in. I'm not going to get too persnickety if some of the fibers get trapped down in here. I'm going to try and get some of those out, but if they do get trapped, I'm not going to worry about them. I do want to make certain I get that tied in nice and tight right up along the side there. I should say right up against the back of the head. And I'll tie that in with 3 nice wraps and trim away the excess. A couple more wraps to secure that, and then I'll put in a whip finish. and a little bit more head cement. That's going to soak down into the core of that Estaz a little bit and help hold it together. And that is the Clouser EZ Popper. Now, as I mentioned, it is just a really, really nice, simple fly if you want to get into doing poppers for bass and panfish and things like that. There's really nothing to it. The only thing that would be, I think, even easier, you can get pre-made heads and just glue those on and finish them out however you want to. But the nice thing with this is that you have tons of different colors of these foam cylinders, different sizes for all kinds of applications. You can make some of these already pre-made, like I said, and then have them, so whatever you need, you can just throw them in, put some tail on there, a little collar, some rubber legs, whatnot, and you've got a great little popper. Very sturdy, very, very effective. That's the Clouser EZ Popper. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.